Thanks everybody for joining us. I started serving as the Associate Director at Waypoint Church Partners last month. Kind of a crazy time to make a transition, right? But that's really where we all are right now and the reason we're gathering around this topic today. Just real quick shout out to friends and church family at my old stomping ground outside of DC in Rockville, Maryland, the Church of Christ at Manor Woods. How y'all doing? I see you out there. Really weird time, right? And then just a quick shout out to all the great new folks that I've been meeting here in North Carolina. So glad that you could hang out with us today. Feel free to hit me up on social media or email anytime. And then you can just see what all we're doing at waypointchurchpartners.com or join our conversation on Facebook. Maryland was the connecting point for me and Ben Cachiaras. Ben's been a huge supporter, great friend the past 20 years. He leads an amazing church just outside of Baltimore, Maryland. Mountain Christian Church is a historic church within the Restoration movement that launched back in 1824, but they are still making history. In a day and age when we grieve the closing of some of our older churches, Mount is growing and thriving and serving their community, reaching the lost, planting new churches, adding new campuses. Lord willing, later this year, they will launch their 5th campus. Ben has served at Mountain as lead pastor since 1997. He's also served on the board of Milligan, Emmanuel, Stadia. He's a contributing editor with Christian Standard, past president of the North American Christian Convention, and is co-founder of Move Northeast, a church planting network in which I had the privilege of participating. So these connections give him the great platform and a broad network of high capacity thought leaders across the country. So we're all just brainstorming the same things these days, right? Trying to figure out how to navigate our churches through uncharted waters. So Ben, we'll start there. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Dyke. It's great to be with everybody. I love hanging out with leaders who are trying to figure this out. I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea of any notion that anyone could pose as an expert in a time like this. We're all kind of figuring out what in the world is going on and how to lead through this. So I am thrilled to kind of hang out with leaders who really love the church, and I love Waypoint. I have a great relationship with Dyke that goes way back, and actually further back with Tim. Through an Iowa connection. I know we have actually some Cedar Falls people on the call here, Tim, so connection with my wife's family, but just love Waypoint, what you guys are doing and I love how you guys have not just been planting churches, but serving as a hub, because now is such an important time for leaders to be together and talk about stuff and help each other through. Who would have thought, if I had told you, back when you got up after watching the Super Bowl, that by now you'd be already sort of like long way through a global pandemic and experiencing the greatest economic downturn since the Depression and people out of work and the greatest disruption since World War II. You would all just said we're crazy, but here we are, and we're leading. We're the ones. We're in the leader chair. You're somehow leading this important work, and I feel how I think a lot of leaders feel. There's a part of this that's been exhausting. There's a part of it that's been energizing. And I really think that kind of summarizes it for me. Leaders are built for moments like these. They arrive and they thrive in these moments. They don't run the other direction. And don't ever forget, as we talk about logistics and practical detail stuff today, that the big picture is that you are leading the most important work in the world. The local church right now has an opportunity, and this is a pivotal moment. And people can't get bacon and toilet paper, but that's not what they need. What they need and what people are actually looking for the first time in a long time actually is meaning and hope and purpose that can only come through the hope of Jesus Christ as mediated through the local church. You're in the leader chair. So God bless you. Let's talk about some ways that we can kind of navigate the next little while here. I think there are 3 kind of churches after the dust sort of settles. There's going to be churches that dive, there's going to be churches that survive, and there's going to be churches that thrive. And the churches that dive, I mean, they're not going to make it through this. Their giving is going to tap them out. They were already probably suffering in certain ways. They were kind of took a mentality of let's wait this thing out and kind of get back to the way we were as soon as possible. We were already seeing somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 churches close their doors every year in this country. This is not going to help that segment that was teetering and hanging by a thread. Some are going to die as a result of this. Some are going to survive. They'll sort of just make it through. They sort of figured out how to get by. Maybe their focus was mostly on their own people. The attempts maybe weren't super impressive to get online or whatever, but they did it, but they just really couldn't wait till the crisis, so to speak, was over, and they made it. And they're going to probably have more of a let's get back to the way we were before. The churches that thrive are going to be churches with that tried to figure out as much as possible, how are we going to get our people connected? How are we going to continue to do ministry during this time? How are we going to address some of the unique needs that COVID is presenting? Because now's a moment to step up. The churches that did that as much as possible and are doing it now and will do it in the next few weeks are the ones on the other side that are going to thrive. And the key is adaptation and, flexing on the fly, the openness to innovate. And of course, we're seeing a lot of innovation go on. It's sort of humorous in a way. You got churches that are known for, we've never done it that way before, and churches that are like, I don't know, maybe we'll do this on the website, and it's taken 3 years to get a committee meeting to do this or whatever. This hit 3 weeks, bam. We had 40% of churches that were online before this. Now there's 97%. So I think it's a proud moment in a way for the church to say, hey, what we're doing is important, and whether anyone else says we're essential, it's essential enough that we're going to put some energy to figuring out how to move forward in this weird environment. And I love that. And I'm sure we've got various, people on the call that are like, I don't know if we're a survive, dive, or thrive church, or how well you feel like you did with the online aspect of this, or connecting with people, or serving the needs. But bottom line is, don't forget that this was a moment where it just really taught us how important adaptation really is. And I think more than ever, the churches of the future are going to be ones that are willing to flex a little, not on mission, not on theology, but on methodology, and just show some openness to not yo-yo back to the way things were. The new normal is not going to look like the old world. So I think just a couple of general things about encouragement here. We have seen, as I've kind of talked with leaders across the country, and what we're experiencing at Mountain is that, Zoom is free to cheap to free, and it has been an amazing tool. And if you're still sort of just coming along on that, I would encourage you. We are doing groups online. Welcome to Mountain Online. Rooted groups online, premarital counseling online, weddings online, funerals online, Financial Peace University, meet the pastor after church, welcome to Mountain classes, our leadership development group. It's different. Some things about it are even better. You lose some things, but the point is we're adapting. And I want to encourage you in those regards to continue to do that. All right. I would just say one kind of note here as well, as we think about big picture. Now let's move on. Let's use our time better. Here, let me throw out a couple of quick little nuggets, just little sort of, I don't know, when I'm around people who do church, they like nuggets of stuff. I heard this idea, we started using it. I want to throw it at you. As long as we're doing online stuff, we're showing some little pre-service stuff going to our vault. Any video you have of a great life change story, we're showing it pre-service. Unlike regular church, people show up early to online church. Make the most of it. It might be the most important thing you do. We're doing announcements and a Zoom call format. So you got 6 or 8 people in Hollywood Squares, way more interesting and more engagement. Put a QR code if you have the technology. If not, make engagement the big deal right now. It's not how many people click or stop by. It's not the 3-second thing that Facebook will tell you that matters the most. That's the equivalent of someone who drives by your church and looks in the window, or sits on the back row, never goes to a group, don't get hung up on this sort of counts and knowing, just know that engagement, how can we draw that person in? That's the key. So You're going to list your website and have, great chat room engagement as much as possible. How can we pray with you? Invite them to the next thing, a meeting with the pastor. We've had a little luck with that. Online hangout, pizza with the pastor, bring your own pizza, meet with one of the ministerial staff kind of thing. So engagement is super important in this time period. Let's get on to talk about reopening. First thing I would say is that we're not using that language. We're kind of almost having some fun with it. Like we're just saying, hey, we're not going to reopen. And the reason is because we never closed. And it gives you an opportunity to talk about how the work of the Lord did not stop because we had a crisis and a lot of things happened. But guess what? The gospel was preached. We had more people hear the gospel of Jesus Christ this Easter than any Easter since Jesus rose 2,000 years ago, okay? That happened because of this crisis, an example of how the church can't be shut down or thwarted. So it's a theological principle to teach this time, not just a stubborn, we're better than the government or no virus is going to beat us, but also to celebrate what your church did in this time period. So as you get to reopening, you can talk about, man, this was a time we didn't close. My goodness, we had this many people join us online. This small group met. We dropped off that much food to our neighbors. This sort of thing still happened. And to remind your people, it's a teaching and a celebration moment. So we're kind of using that playful language of saying we're not reopening, just to remind us of those important things. As you get closer to, everyone's trying to decide what to do. Some of you are probably already open. Some are like, what are we going to do? Is it happening now? Like most people on this call, your governor probably upset the fruit basket in the last, 72 hours. Our Maryland governor last night, after we had all these plans and the previous plan looked like nothing was happening with churches till fall, probably realistically. Now it's all of a sudden, he said, the 50% thing, and you can go now, but with a bunch of distancing and confusing measures in place. That's a lot where we are. You got three kind of people in your church. You got the people who are like the now people. They're like, this whole thing is ridiculous anyway. I'm so eager to get together. Let's just do it. I don't care what the restrictions are. I'm ready to hug you and lick your face the second I walk in on day one. You've also got some later people. They're like, I don't know about right now. A little more cautious, call them late adopters on that bell curve we've seen. After a bit, I'll see if some people get together and survive. I want to make sure there's not going to be an uptick. I don't want to be, but I'm kind of eager, but I'm going to wait a couple more weeks or maybe a while longer. And then you've got the never people. It's like, I'm never shaking a hand as long as I live. I'm never going to a movie. I'm not coming to your church. I'm going to stay in my hole. This has scared me to death. And you've got all three kind of people probably on this call, but also in your church. So what does that mean? It means, first of all, whatever decision you make, you're not going to make everyone happy. The good news is you get to choose whom you disappoint. It probably also means that the sooner you become, the closer to the front edge of this that you try to go, the likelihood of you disappointing or concerning more people probably rises. The later you wait, that's also true. There's a sweet spot middle, not that our only leadership style is how can we make everybody happy, but there is something, an art of leadership that's going to say, let's not try to push uphill in a way where everyone's going to be freaked out and no one's going to want to do it. So keep that in mind. I think certainly it's true that guests and people that don't know Jesus aren't particularly interested in being the first ones back. Can I remind us that outreach needs to be a filter that we're looking through as we make our decisions, not just the group in your church that screams the loudest or the Sunday school group that whatever it is. Those are important and those are pastoral needs, but our mission need to reach lost people has to be considered as well. And so I just think I would keep that in mind as you kind of think about those decisions. And I hope I don't need to remind everybody that at least at our place, we had a dickens of a time getting those people to come to church before. Just because we had a crisis doesn't mean they're going to come running through our doors. And so we've got to keep that in mind as we plan for reopening. I also want to say, as we kind of get down to some brass tacks here, remember that regionally and even in kind of relatively close areas, there are very different perceptions, different regional and government ordinances, and different kind of political and just perception issues that are very powerful, very strong, and very real. And every leader needs to take these into account the best you can. And I just want to say that because I'm guessing that what's going to happen in the next few weeks is that churches already, we're seeing it, are taking very different stances on this. These sort of, let's open right now, let's wait a while, or let's not be in a hurry at all. And what the last thing we need to do is give Satan a foothold in this by dogging some pastor or preacher or minister in another place who's doing the best and making the right decision for their context. And then for us to get online and say, hey, that's so stupid that they're doing that. Don't they love Jesus? They should be meeting. Or how dare you meet? You must not love people because you're making, that's the last thing. So we're going to respect, this is one of those non-essential issues, and everyone's going to do the best they can, just like you are, to try to make the best decision that's unique to your situation, particularly across states, but even within states, there's a pretty big gap. So what we're seeing is exactly what we've identified. There are churches that are already open. I've talked to several of those leaders, some who are very ready to go and making plans for this weekend or maybe the weekend after. And their basic approach is this: we're going to take whatever measures we need to take. We're going to sanitize. We're going to make masks and hand them out. We're going to distance our chairs. We're going to do signups online or find some way to get traffic moving one direction. Try to put stuff in the commons areas so people don't congregate. We're going to figure out a way to do a service, maybe without singing. We're going to hold the doors. We're going to stand up, blah, all of that stuff. And there are churches that are doing that. Places like Texas, for example, Georgia, are ahead of where most of us on this call probably are, as a lot of us I know are from out here a little bit in the mid-Atlantic area. I will just tell you what we're seeing so far is that most of those gatherings are much smaller than anticipated. There is a very excitable group who's eager to get together immediately, but in many places, those who actually come is turning out to be smaller. Life Church, for example, in Oklahoma, they set up for 40% of what they were pre-COVID. That's what they could do with distancing measures and chairs, advertise it, had their opening. What they got was 10% of where they were pre-opening. In Texas, we're seeing similar results. I think those that have been open 2 and 3 weeks are seeing the initial excitement was pretty high the first week. They're already wondering, oh, this is going to get old in a hurry, particularly if the masks have to stay. Masks is a big one, and kids ministry is the big question mark that everyone is trying to figure out. If kids have to be in with adults, it feels like it's a harder issue to know what to do there. And then there are a second group of churches that aren't just the right now as quick as possible. We want to do something, but we don't feel it's immediate, but it's going to be sooner than later. So it's kind of a medium group, and they're experimenting. I'm seeing some that are experimenting with drive-in services. You've seen these. It's a way to get people together, but without having to do all of the hoop jumping with distancing and so forth. The opinions about it, even from those who've done drive-in services, as far as I can see from the handful I've talked to, it ranges from, what's the point? I can, if I'm not going to get out and hug people and see and worship in a gathering, what's the point? To, that was so cool. I'm so glad we did it because we finally just did something that gave us a rallying point and gave us an opportunity to get together. Depending on what your connections are, it can be expensive to get a screen if you want to use a screen, or to line up the AM or FM, whatever the technology you use there. I'll leave it for you to decide, but we're seeing churches, and there are models around the country where that's happening. The third group would be sort of we're as eager to see things return to a gathering in physical presence as much as anyone. However, we're not in a mad rush, and there are some reasons for that. Full disclosure, that's kind of where our church, after kind of weighing everything, has come down. And I thought maybe what I would do is share with you some of those principles. And I'm trying to keep track of the time. Oh, okay, no. So we're already almost out of presentation time. Let me give you the sort of quick skinny on it, and then maybe we'll go to questions. Where we are as a church is more of the, hey, we're not going to set a date, but we've come up with 4 kind of guiding principles that will help inform us at each sort of dynamic step of this process to know what to do. Number 1, we really want to lean to the future, not the past. So like, the idea, we're going to kind of avoid the language like can't wait till we get back to things. We're talking about what's the new future look like. There's some stuff to unpack there, but you get my gist. I can include this document in the email that Becca's going to send around to you so you can look through it at your leisure. But the other thing is the whole idea about we're not reopening because we never closed. But the third is maybe the most important one for us, and that is that we're eager to get together, but we're not in a hurry. Bottom line, when we've looked at, and we just put out a video that will go out to on all of our social to our constituency. If you want to see how I worded it, just go to mountaincc.org or on the website or one of our Facebook pages. You'll see it in an hour or so. I think it goes out. We just tried to say, look, as eager as we are to get together, you know what? With the restrictions still in place, with a recommended 250 threshold for us, that's a factor. With distancing recommended at 7 feet in our setting, and with, kids ministry distanced is an oxymoron, so no kids ministry. The protocols, the cleaning, the sort of vibe of masks on, no singing as it's encouraged at this point in our setting, and the sort of way we do welcome and all of that just leaves us in a place where we feel like the worship will be something sort of a less than experience than what we can't do what Mountain does. For crying out loud, we're a congregation, and under the current restrictions, that's the one thing they're not allowing us to do is actually congregate. And so our best judgment at this point, with kids being a priority, the sort of vibe we feel like it'll create, the sort of psychological experience of it, and just the sort of desperate sort of let's be first, when in fact, right now we also have a situation where we're reaching probably more people we've ever reached online. A lot of those are unchurched people that weren't coming before and may not come later. And also just, we don't want to do anything to injure our credibility with the community. I think for us in our particular context to be on the leading edge of this would probably sound a little culturally tone deaf. Like, okay, technically you can do this, but why in the world are you doing this is how a lot of people are going to react to it. We've worked hard to be a blessing to our community. We don't want to necessarily sort of fight City Hall on this one and say, well, doggone it, we're going to sort of be first in. We think that it could injure our reputation with the unchurched, who probably aren't eager to see, oh, those dumb Christians, there they go again, doing something that in their mind. So we're not afraid to meet and to do whatever it takes, but we anticipate waiting a little while longer and not being in first in. We're not going to be the last in either. In the meantime, we're going to innovate with outdoor activities, start doing as much as we can with group life and intermediate sizes as those things are relaxed. And we know we'll have to cast a lot of vision to help keep people moving. Answer the why. That's the biggest thing. Communicate with vision. Help pastorally because people are going to be confused. And don't be afraid to teach people even theologically right now, like, this is what's going on and why. So ours is not a set of dates. Ours is like a set of criteria when it feels like these things are in place, when sporting events start happening, when we can do what we do best, we're going to say all systems go. For us, that'll look like probably a staff-only event first, then a sort of gathering with volunteers and core people. Like we have a training camp event, we'll do that on a weekend. Still record and show the online service, but have a volunteer-only event where they come together and we have kids ministry. It's the sort of precursor. It'll allow us to do several things. Train everyone in all the new protocols, whatever they're going to be. Here's how we're going to pass communion and offering, and here's how we're going to greet and do the doors, and here's how we do check-in for kids, and here's how we give a chance to do that, but also to create a buzz and some momentum. Let the word leak out. It's exciting. It gives us a sort of pre-launch like you would for a church plant. And then maybe another sort of soft opening where it's like not publicized publicly, but to all the Mountain family, like, let's have a soft opening. We don't care if everybody comes, but one more week of sort of, hey, we're going to do this next as a build-up to say, let's resume as normal. When that is, I don't know. But when we get back together, we're going to do something big every week for like 5 weeks. Honor graduates 1 week. Everyone who had a funeral, we're going to stand by you and cry with you the second week. If you got married or had an engagement or some big life event, we're going to celebrate that with video or whatever, or show some slides or pray for you or clap for you or whatever. Acknowledge job losses another week. Celebrate healthcare heroes another. So the first several weeks back, we'll have some momentum, treat it like a church plant, and launch big. That's all. I better stop right there. I have more to say, but we really want to make sure we honor questions.
All right, Ben, that was loaded. Thanks for sharing all that. And there's one good question at least. And if you got another question, now the time's popping in a little bit of time that we've got remaining. But one great question is, whenever we reopen, but we have some kind of capacity in our building and in our auditorium, 50%, and then social distancing, we get whatever number. How are you going to handle turning people away when you reach that number?
Yeah, it's a horrible question that no one wants to answer. And that's one of the reasons we're taking the approach we are, to be honest. I don't want to be in that situation. There was a church that did open, and a nurse showed up, and she let it be known at the door that she was seeing a COVID-19 person in the last 14 days or whatever. And they had to tell her, thank you, but you need to go home. That scenario played out as like a nightmare. But they also told that, we did pastoral follow-up. And, she was very understanding because she's a core person. The churches I'm hearing about, Tim, that are solving this are trying to do almost a registration process online using those various tools and technology out there, apps and whatnot. You almost have to sign up ahead of time. And of course, then literally someone is sitting there going, well, here's a family of 4. How do you set the chairs? You have a cluster of 4, some solos. You almost hope single people don't come because you got to put distance between them. You want families with bigger, it just gets crazy. So I don't have a good answer, but the churches I've seen that are doing it are trying hard to say, we can only take on a reservation basis. To me, that's counterproductive to what we want to do. We have a thing painted on our wall. This is for everyone. So we don't want to open before, we can have a place where we got to say, except if you're old or feeling vulnerable or had a fever or, aren't on the inside loop where you already know how to register on our site. So for us, that's one of the problems actually, Tim.
All right. Yeah, I've heard of many churches trying to figure out how to register if they're going to have 50 in their auditorium or 100 or whatever. Unfortunately, we've got to do that. You've still got streaming available for everyone that can't get in.
Otherwise, you'd just be like first come, first serve. And maybe that's a good thing. It creates a sort of, man, I couldn't get in. I'm going to go to the next week or something.
Yeah. But then they'll stand in the lobby together and have to social distance, but waiting for the next service. But here's one other really great question that we've been asked a couple of times. And that is, does Mountain have a plan for the first time you discover that someone with COVID has attended your church once you reopen?
Yeah. We've had a little experience with this already. We've had a few people die and a few people on our staff that were kind of recording with distancing measures who had COVID. We had to do the lockdown thing. I hear there's going to be quite a bit of energy put into, and I'm forgetting that someone will know the name of this, but what's it called? Tracking. That's going to be done. And the government wants to have that data. And so the answer is no, we don't have that figured out yet, but you're going to need to say, have you been ill or you have to report it because they want to track that data. We don't have that figured out. That's the short answer. No, we do not.
All right. I think for all of these, what we're learning is the best thing, and you've already just said this on the front end, the best thing is to tell your people your plan, whatever plan you've got, is to get ahead with communication because they're asking. And if you're not answering, really your leadership credibility is at stake if you don't come out and say, this is our plan, and then they can breathe a sigh of relief that they know what's going to happen regardless of what your plan is. So that's really strong.
I think people respect you if you can, even if you have to say, y'all know this is changing every day. The governor just said this. So here's our best thinking at this point. It's probably a better statement than, doggone it, we've made this decision, because things may change. I may change some of this. That's why we like principles that we may have to adapt rather than setting something out. I don't know how you could predict something more than 2 or 3 weeks right now.
Yeah. You alluded to this already, but I wonder if you could just address your opinion of the church's reputation at stake by bucking the authorities versus some of the biblical admonitions towards obeying and honoring our authorities.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I want to be very respectful because I think this is a sort of leadership, a sort of decision that you make about how you want your church to interact with culture. It's a bigger question. But I think on this one here, I think I'll just tell you how our perspective is we worked very hard to create a reputation as Jesus Church in our community that's here to bless this community. We're going to show up by serving. We believe that serving and meeting practical needs in our community is one of the best apologetics we can make for the gospel in our time. It's the thing that might cause someone to say, maybe there's something to this after all. We've worked so hard on that. We don't want to do anything that would, in the mind of anyone, just sort of come off as the mind. We have to remember what is the mindset of the very people we're trying to reach.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those people think we're a bunch of, goofball, redneck, ignoramuses who are just like, we're going to get together, doggone it. We don't believe no viruses. Jesus is bigger, whatever. That kind of mentality can actually only serve to confirm some of the negative bias and the reason I say that's important is that's the end game is mission on this. So I think we have to be careful how we position ourselves in this. So that we lead through this in a way that says we're making these decisions because we have a mission to accomplish, but also we really care about, our reputation in the community, and we want to serve and be a blessing to this community. I think, of course, we're not just going to say we'll do whatever the government says. If the government says, as they did in Illinois, hey, everyone can meet except churches, well, then I'm going to hire a lawyer too. And we're going to say, excuse me, no. And they're going to back off. But I don't see this as a religious liberties issue. I see this as let's come alongside government leaders who are doing the best they can to open everything as quickly as they can without making it unsafe. So we're not going to push against that in a way that says, well, we're going to go faster than they are, because I think while there might be some enthusiastic church people, it's going to cost us with the very people we're trying to reach, and we don't want to do that.
All right, we've had two. We are about out of time. We've got a couple good questions that we will try and address offline. I do want to tell those that are on the call right now that we are putting together a 10-minute video as we speak about questions to ask your church as you're preparing your timeline. And one of our board of directors, great leader Chad Simpkins at the Journey Church, one of our partnering churches, sent out a survey this week. This is a growing church, a large church of 500 plus, and they were surprised at the number of people that said how low the number of people that said they're ready to come back right away. It was about 38% of their church said we're coming back right away. The other 62% said we're not so sure. And so that addresses some of those numbers that you said. So within the next day or so, you're going to see a 10-minute video from Waypoint that shares and talks about those questions that'll help you gauge where you're at on that spectrum that Ben described on choosing your timeline based on where your people are. And so be on the look for that, as well as the survey questions that are attached to it. We are going to try and give you a bunch of resources that have been described in this webinar today. Our time is just about up. So I'd like to tell you just very quickly, we do have a whole group of resources on our YouTube channel, Waypoint 55 webinars, 3 years worth of resourcing, but several from the last week that could be very helpful to your church. Someone asked about creative ideas with kids at this time. There's a video on there. What do you do with the digitally unconnected at your church? There's a video about that. And so check that out. You may want to join our next webinar, our regularly scheduled monthly webinar next Monday, this coming Monday, on Why Merge. That we've got 2 churches in our region that within a year ago, or about a year ago, chose to merge with a larger church, and they're going to tell their story about that and why they did it. But also, you saw so we hope you sign up and join for that if you're in that category of curious how that would work. But I want to give a final thanks to Mid-Atlantic Christian University, who is our ministry partner in the region, but also the sponsor of our webinar platform, who is doing ministry in this region just like we are. So we're thankful that they've been a part of this since the very beginning of our webinar series, but also during this really critical time. So thank you to them again. I want to say thanks to Ben for his leadership and his servant's heart for serving churches and leaders just like we have. And so you'll have an opportunity to interact with him, even with questions after the fact that we can feed to him that we didn't necessarily get to answer today. So be on the lookout for the follow-up email that you'll receive with some of these resources here in the next day or so. All right, well, have a great weekend, whether you're meeting in person, live, or drive-in, or online, or any combination thereof. Have a great weekend.